When the war ended, the world that remained was not one of victory or triumph. It was a world of silence. The bombs had stopped falling, the skies were no longer lit by fire, but the damage was done. Civilization, as we had known it, was over. What we were left with was something raw and fragile, like a wound that hadn't yet begun to heal. The first weeks after the war were the hardest. We were alive, but that was the only claim we could make. The cities had become graveyards, their towering buildings reduced to jagged rubble. Entire nations had vanished, their borders meaningless now. The survivors were scattered and aimless, haunted by the ghosts of those who hadn't made it. And yet, in that bleakness, something unexpected began to stir. It wasn't hope, at least not at first, but a kind of quiet determination. We couldn't undo what had been done, but perhaps, just perhaps, we could begin again. Life among the survivors, I found myself among a small group of survivors, huddled together in what had once been a university library. The building, remarkably, had remained standing, though its walls were cracked and its windows blown out. Books lay scattered everywhere, their pages torn and charred. We used them for warmth in those early days, though it felt like sacrilege to burn the knowledge of the past. We were an odd collection of people, farmers, teachers, mechanics, and a former politician who no longer had anyone to govern. None of us had any real answers, but we had questions. Questions about what had happened, and, more importantly, what came next. One evening, as we sat around a makeshift fire, one of the group, a woman named Sarah, began to speak. She had been a scientist before the war, working in a government lab on projects she wasn't allowed to discuss. But now, with no one left to enforce her silence, she told us everything. They didn't listen, she said, her voice heavy with regret. We warned them about what these weapons could do. We told them it wasn't just the explosions, it was the fallout, the radiation, the way it would poison the land for generations. But they didn't care. All they saw was power. Someone asked her what she thought we should do now. Sarah was silent for a long moment, staring into the fire. We can't go back, she said finally. The world we had is gone, but maybe that's a good thing. Maybe now we can build something better. The ghosts of the past, as we began to explore the ruins, searching for supplies and shelter. We found reminders of what we had lost everywhere we turned. In one shattered city, we came across a park where children's toys lay scattered among the rubble. In another, we found a church still standing, its stained glass windows miraculously intact, though no one remained to pray. The hardest moments were the ones where we saw signs of life interrupted. Half-finished meals on tables, clocks stopped at the exact moment the bombs fell, photographs of smiling families buried under layers of dust. It was as if the world had been frozen in its final moments. A stark reminder of what had been taken from us. But there were also signs of resilience. In one abandoned town, we found a garden that had somehow survived, its flowers blooming defiantly amid the destruction. It was a small thing, but it gave us a kind of hope. If the earth could heal, maybe we could too. The call for unity, it was during this time that we began to hear whispers of something larger, a gathering of survivors somewhere to the south where people were trying to rebuild. At first, it seemed like a rumor, too good to be true. But as the days passed, more and more travelers confirmed it. There was a place, they said, where leaders, thinkers, and ordinary people were coming together to discuss the future. The idea of a world congress, as some called it, was both thrilling and daunting. How could we possibly rebuild when so much had been destroyed? And yet, the thought of sitting down with others, of sharing ideas and forging a new path, was enough to get us moving. We packed what little we had and began the long journey south. It wasn't easy. Many of us were weak from hunger, and the roads were treacherous, littered with the remnants of war. But step by step, mile by mile, we made our way toward the promise of something better. The Congress of Survivors, the gathering place, turned out to be an old amphitheater. Its stone steps, weathered by time, but still sturdy, Hundreds of people had come, some from as far away as the other side of the continent. They were engineers, farmers, doctors, teachers, anyone who had survived and had something to offer. For weeks, the amphitheater buzzed with debates and discussions. There were arguments, of course, about what had gone wrong, about who was to blame, but there was also a sense of purpose. We knew that if we didn't find a way to work together, the world would remain broken forever. One of the most compelling voices at the Congress belonged to an old man named Elias, a historian who had lived through 2 world wars before the atomic one. "This is not the first time humanity has destroyed itself," he said, his voice echoing through the amphitheater. "But it must be the last. We cannot afford to repeat the mistakes of the past. We must let go of our divisions, our nations, our borders, our greed, and build something new." His words sparked a heated debate. Could we really move beyond nations and borders? Was it possible to create a world without the rivalries and competitions that had led us to war? It seemed like a utopian dream, but as Elias reminded us, it was the only dream we had left. A new vision. In the end, the survivors agreed to try. They formed what they called the World Council, a group of representatives tasked with leading humanity into its next chapter. The Council's first decision was symbolic but powerful. They declared the dissolution of all national borders. From that day forward, there would be no more countries, no more flags, no more wars over territory or power. It wasn't a perfect solution, nothing is, but it was a start. The Council also began drafting plans for a new society, one based on cooperation rather than competition. Education, they argued, would be the cornerstone of this new world. Every child, no matter where they were born, would be taught not just science and history, but also empathy, ethics, and the lessons of the war. The seeds of hope as we left the Congress, returning to our scattered communities. There was a sense that we were part of something larger than ourselves. The ruins of the old world still surrounded us, but now they felt less like a reminder of failure and more like a foundation for something new. I wish I could tell you that it was easy, that we rebuilt the world overnight. It wasn't. There were setbacks and struggles, moments when it seemed like we might fail. But for the first time in a long time, we had a purpose. We had hope. Looking ahead, the vision of a new world, the ruins of the past, became the building blocks of the future. In the next chapter, the survivor's vision begins to take shape, as the World Council works to create a society that will never again repeat the mistakes of its predecessors. But as always, progress comes with challenges, and the question remains, can humanity truly change?